Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Real Life on our Wellspring podcast. Thanks for tuning in. This is Brian.
And this is Craig.
Nice, man. We're getting better at this.
We are. Well, maybe.
I think the intros are getting better.
There you go.
I think they were. The first one was a little rough. Thanks for tuning in, though.
Thank you.
This is going to be good. Hey, so we're going to kick into a conversation today with the whole idea of this podcast being real life. You and I were talking just a minute ago. How do people know around me if I'm a follower of Jesus in the real world?
That's a really good question.
So how do they know? How do people find out, oh, this guy is a Jesus follower in real life? How are people going to find that out? How do people discover that?
Right. And it's not because I wear a shirt, right?
Yeah, right. It's not because I have Wellspring merch on and you wear your church's T-shirt and they're like, that guy. Yeah. He's a follower of Jesus.
Right.
That's
He's
it.
got the right shirt on.
That's it, yeah. Or that you're blasting K-Love in your car.
There you go.
At a red light.
No, there's got to be something more, right?
Yeah, there has to be something more to that. Let's take a second. What do you think people would, what do you think right now pops into your head of how would people know that I'm a follower of Jesus?
You know, so we were talking before, and the first scripture that came to mind was this scripture in John 13 where Jesus says, by this you will know them, that's us, will know that they're disciples of me because you love one another. And he also says, in the same way that he loved us. Yeah. So I kind of think that's a pretty good place to start, a pretty solid definition there, something that Jesus said. Right?
Yeah, that kind of boils down the whole idea of going, okay, so how do people know that I am a follower of Jesus? Is it that I attend church perfectly?
Right.
No. Is it that I never get angry ever? I'm always perfectly behaved.
No,
right.
That's not it.
I'm the good boy. I'm the good little girl. Everything is perfect in my life. That's not how people.
I have a great job. I'm a community leader.
Yeah.
I'm a good husband. I'm a good father.
I donate to a lot of charities.
I have a lot of philanthropic donations going around the place.
Look at all the good things I do. Obviously, I'm a follower of Jesus.
Jesus didn't say anything about those things. And I kind of wish he did, but that's not what he said. So.
I know, right? It would be nice if I felt like if it was based on my performance. That way I could say, okay, I'm doing great.
I'm doing good.
I'm doing great.
I can measure it.
Instead, and I actually have heard this statement before, he makes it very simple, but extremely demanding.
Right.
Is typically the way
to put it.
Typically what Jesus does.
Absolutely.
He doesn't make it really complicated and say, all right, here are all the things that you do, just check all these boxes. Instead, he makes it really simple, but he asks a lot of us. And that's what he says in John. He says, so I'm giving you now a new commandment, love each other, just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciple.
Wow.
That's how the world knows.
So if we're looking for proof, then that's it right there.
Yeah. It's how you love each other. In the church.
Wow.
Which I don't know about you, but like, man, I feel like everybody in the church is this always super loving, right?
Yeah. I know I'm not.
Right, yeah.
I know I'm not. I wish I could be loving all the time, but I'm not.
The reality is this is the demanding part.
Yeah.
It is to love each other, like within the church, you know?
Absolutely.
And sometimes that's difficult. And the reason why I can say that is because I know that I'm difficult.
Yeah.
I'm probably not the easiest person to love.
I don't know. I think I take the cake on that one. So
yeah. So I think it's really interesting if we're going to have this conversation about real life, bringing our faith into real life. How do we express it in real life? How do people experience it in real life? Ultimately, Jesus gives us a really simple answer. This is how people know
love one
that
another.
You're my follower. Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. What does this look like practically? It sounds all great, and I love one another. Yep.
I think just buying each other flowers, saying nice things,
right?
That
Inviting
kind of
someone around for dinner.
Right, maybe that.
Yeah.
That's it, and that's it.
Right, and then we're done.
Right.
Okay, and that's the end of the podcast. So.
I think even in that passage of scripture, Jesus gives us the way to do that. How to unpack it, and you hit on it right out of the gate. Jesus says, just as I have loved you. Like in the same way that I've loved you.
So okay. So I kind of believe as a believer, that he loves me no matter what, that he loves me despite my many failings and my shortfalls and my mistakes and my sins, if you want to use that word. He loves me. So is he asking us to love one another with that same love?
That's what it sounds like. Pretty demanding.
Dang, man.
Not based on your behavior.
Yeah.
You don't have to behave perfectly for me to love you.
Yeah.
You don't have to do everything that I like all the time for me to love you. It's that type of expression of love that makes this type of community different. Like
So we're getting pretty heavy here.
Yeah, well, the community, that word gets thrown around all the time.
It does
in churches. We throw it around a lot.
Yep.
Like,
Come and be part of the community at our church.
Find your people.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like those type of phrases. And I understand why churches use that phrase. I saw a Barna survey recently where they were asking, hey, like, what is most important for you when you're looking for a church? You know, and so they listed a few things. Number one was like doctrine, what you believe, which I think is good, but I don't know. You know, I think also some people being surveyed are like, I think I have to click this one,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So besides that answer, the next highest one was the sense of community. And so that's obviously very important to us. It's very important. We've even said on this podcast, you are not meant to live life alone. Right?
You got to be part of a community. Yeah.
So when we say that, how is that different than other friendships, other relationships that I have?
Right.
You and I have all kinds of relationships with people in different environments. Right?
Absolutely.
Well, people who I would consider friends, people who consider me a friend. Right? But there should be something different when we talk about the community that we have with one another. Like as followers,
believers.
As followers of
Christ,
Jesus, we should have something different. Not just like, oh yeah, these are my buds. Right.
Look, I'm going to come right out and say it, and I don't think we do that very well.
No. I think I'm not super great at it at all.
And I'm kind of feeling a little convicted here as we talk about this. So this is a reminder, and it's let me just unpack some ideas around how I think I could do better in this area. And I know I've got a long way to go, but part of that is just being able to sit with and listen to a fellow believer in whatever it is they're going through in life, and maybe even to let them know what I'm going through. And then we start getting back into that vulnerable word that we talked about in that first podcast.
But isn't that so weird? I feel like it happens in Christian circles all the time, where I am always trying to establish where I am in this Christian relationship. You know, I've been following Jesus for a while. I can help you.
Yes.
You know, like it's always something that's kind of strange that happens in
hierarchy.
Yeah, the hierarchy that exists. And I'm sure you can point to that in other relationships too.
Of course.
But you have to ask yourself, like, well, does that belong in this type of community that we're talking about? Because if I'm supposed to love people in the same way that Jesus loved me, I've read somewhere that he made himself of no reputation.
Yeah.
So maybe the hierarchy idea doesn't belong in this community.
I think there is a hierarchy. It's just kind of upside down to what we think, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a big idea. We can talk about that.
So, I've got to be less than, make myself humble.
For sure.
Subservient to, not subservient, but humble to others.
Yeah.
And that's a tough thing to do.
Yeah.
That's a really tough thing to do, because I've got a couple of things that hold me up on that constantly. One, I've got an advice monster that lives inside of me. I just love giving advice.
Yeah. Well, you've given me some good ones, so like I don't mind hearing it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but isn't that what we try to do? So in this hierarchy, we say, hey, I'm a older Christian, I'm more mature, I've got greater character, blah, 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 blah. So therefore, in this loving Christian environment, I'm going to jump in and give everyone a bunch of advice. Wrong. That's not going to build. Well, that's not going to build relationship in a hurry.
And one thing that's really interesting too, and it happens in like Christian communities all over the place, even online, you see it happen all the time, is people like cliche each other to death.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I hate
Like
that.
somebody will be going through something hard, and their way of being there for them is like, man, all things work together for good, you know?
Yeah.
Like you're going to be okay.
Right.
And it's like, I believe that.
Yep.
But when a person has their life falling apart, a lot of times what I desire is just to know that someone is here with me,
Yeah, there you go.
right? Like someone is here with me.
Yeah, my goodness. That is so powerful.
And that kind of is really kind of points to the difference between community when we say that as believers, when we say that word community, even though it gets thrown around a lot, kind of points to the difference of that type of community versus relationships and communities and friendships that I have in other avenues and other venues with other people who aren't followers of Jesus. That's not to say that like I should only have friendships with believers.
Of course not.
Like, man, I have relationships with all kinds of people.
Yeah.
I think people are fascinating,
Right.
you know. So, and I'm also the type of I'm not an introvert. So, like,
Right.
if
am.
if I meet somebody and they got something weird going on, I'm like, man, tell me about
Tell me
that.
about it. Right.
Like,
Right.
I think that's wild.
Yep.
But something that's different about our community as followers of Jesus versus another one is that ours is centered around Christ.
Yeah.
Like there is no Christian community without Christ at the center of it.
And this idea that he loves me no matter what. Of course, he calls me to a higher version of myself, and he's not happy with my mistakes.
And I've had other followers of Christ do the same thing with me.
Right.
Call me to a higher standard.
Yeah.
You know, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I value that.
But that comes after having spent the time to build a relationship, a loving relationship, which means I'm going to love you no matter what.
Yeah.
I got to take the time to love you no matter what, and get to know you. And you're going to get to know me as well.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to get to know me is for me to open up. And of course, that raises this idea of this fear. Why do we find this so hard? And I know for me, one of the things that I find so hard is this idea that if you really knew me, that I would be rejected, that you wouldn't like me.
And I think that goes back to, and we can even have a conversation about conflict with this, but I think it goes back to the things that motivate me.
Right.
And I know that some of the things that might motivate me are ugly.
Right.
You know, they're ugly. And so I don't want you to see that. I don't want you to know that.
Gaining approval from other people.
Yeah. So that is what's motivating me, and that's an ugly thing. Right. So I don't want you to look at me in that light, or I don't want to bring you that close, because these things that are motivating me in the background aren't really beautiful.
Right.
So when it comes to conflict, certainly that happens because, I mean, if you're a human. Regardless if you're a follower of Jesus or not, like conflict is going to happen with people.
And I hate conflict. I really do.
Yeah, I understand. It's not my favorite thing in the world.
Right.
Sometimes if I'm in a bad mood, I don't mind it.
Yeah. Sure.
If I'm being honest, I don't mind it.
But I heard this great saying the other day that a conflict delayed is a conflict multiplied.
Oh yeah.
And that's the thing I'm trying to remind myself of constantly, because I naturally want to delay the conflict. I want to avoid the conflict altogether. But I find that if I don't address it sooner, then it does multiply.
Yeah.
It does get worse.
Well, and the reality about conflict, the thing that really has helped me wrap my mind and my heart about not running from it is the understanding that conflict breeds intimacy. That's what conflict does.
Right.
Conflict breeds intimacy.
Yep.
It gives an opportunity. If you and I have a disagreement, it has an opportunity for you and I to actually end up closer on the backside of it.
Oh my goodness.
Like if I have a disagreement with my spouse, if we're going to argue about something, a lot of times on the back end of that argument, once we come to a mutual understanding that we understand one another, there's closeness. I'm glad we're past that.
Yep.
I'm glad that I changed my mind about that. You were right, or I was wrong, or however that ends up. It gives an opportunity for there to be intimacy.
Right.
And that, having my mind wrapped around that is on the other side of conflict. I would rather be there.
And then we circle back around to this idea of Christ's love for us, his way of loving one another. We saw it often. He did not avoid conflict.
No.
And yet, with some of his disciples, with Peter and many of the disciples he had issues with, and he just walked right in that conflict, and yet the love afterwards, the love he showed through that conflict and the love that was built afterwards was just a multitude times of what it could ever have been beforehand.
Yeah. So understanding that idea of intimacy is on the other side of conflict. So I'm not going to be. I'm not going to avoid really this. Yeah. I'm going to step into it because there's going to be some intimacy there on the other side that is valuable because I'm supposed to love you in the same way that Christ loves me.
Yep.
And so that's certainly one aspect of conflict. But even to circle back around to the reason why conflict gets messy sometimes between believers is because there's this motivation in the background,
that's true,
that I don't want you to know about.
Right.
So instead, I'm going to make it about something else.
I've got an agenda, or I've got a fear, or I've got something that's driving my anger, and that's not resolving the conflict at all.
And that's the beautiful thing about like Jesus, who is our example. He has no other motive.
Yeah.
Like his motive is extremely clear, and he states it again and again,
doesn't he?
Like, I love you. Like my command, my dream for you is for you to love God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, and your strength, and love your neighbor.
And then he says again that our love for one another proves to the world that we're true followers of his. Man, that's a big demand.
Which is so funny because I think it's worth reiterating. It seems like in the church or as a follower of Jesus, I want to make it about almost anything else as to why people know that like I'm a follower of Jesus. Like it's all these other things, as opposed to I've experienced this love from God,
right?
And so I'm just going to reflect it to you,
whether
you deserve it or not, because I didn't deserve it, and so I'm just going to reflect it back to you, and we're going to be there for each other, just in the same way that Jesus has always been there for me. There's never been a moment he's forsaken me or turned his back on me. And so it'll be the same thing with this community. And that's what makes it different. The fact that like, no, we're in this. That doesn't mean that we don't disagree ever. That doesn't mean that, but it means that in our disagreement, I'm not going to hide a motive from you.
Right.
I'm just going to say, no, this is where I'm at. This is it. And then that way we can have that unity even in a disagreement.
Absolutely. And, the other thing I found too, that I got a long way to get better at this, but one thing I found is to be able to, that my capacity to listen to you in your pain is, again, multiplied by Christ's love in me.
Yeah.
I can sit and listen and really try to understand what you're saying, versus the old way of doing things, the way that I often fall back to is I'm too busy thinking about what I'm going to say next. I'm not really listening. I don't really care. And it just doesn't help build relationships.
I think where you can really get a sense of this, like where for me I've experienced any kind of progress or life there, is in the realization that I didn't need forgiveness or the gospel one time. that actually the closer I try to get to like a deeper or a better relationship with the Lord, the closer I get, it's almost like one of the things that trying to describe who Jesus was is he's the light of the world. Like so the closer I get, the more the light shines on like my own sin.
That's true. That's true.
So we're in this series, Dinners with Sinners. I'm going to say this on Sunday too, whether people listen to this podcast or not. So we're in this series, Dinners with Sinners, and there's a lot of connotation to that idea, as if even when we're talking about it, that like, oh, Jesus had dinner with these dirty, rotten sinners that we're not anymore.
Right.
Paul in the New Testament says, talking about himself, calls himself the chiefest of sinners. sinners of whom I am chief.
Right.
That is not false humility.
No.
Like that is what I'm talking about.
And awareness of how bad we are.
Yeah, the closer I get
Yeah.
to Jesus, the more I see, man, here's where I need forgiveness.
My weaknesses, my brokenness.
God, this is where I need the gospel. I need it here. I need it here. I need it here. And it's in that type of realization that what you're talking about, being able to sit and empathize and listen to a person when they're pointing out their brokenness or when they're pointing out their own struggles, like it doesn't matter if I hadn't struggled with that in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years, or I've never struggled with a particular thing that they might be struggling with or not going through. I'm acutely aware of my own brokenness. That's Charlie. If you guys haven't met Charlie, he's a good boy. He's a real good boy. And he's watching us right now. But yeah, I'm acutely aware of my own brokenness. Yeah. And so that's what, that's what's unique in this Christian community that we can have with one another.
Right.
Is that I can listen, I can relate to you regardless of where you're at in your life or where I'm at in mine. Because I'm aware of my own need for Christ, and He's the center of our community.
That's really good. That's really good. Yeah, man. If only I was good at able to do what we just talked about, then I'd be really good.
Me too, dude. If I would bat 1,000, could you imagine?
Yeah, right.
That's awesome.
But it just reminds us, right, that it's a work in progress. That it's a daily process to continue to grow and build my character in Christ, and this is something that we can. Again, let's do this together.
Yeah.
We can't do this alone. And it's going to take each other to get to know one another and to get to know Christ better.
Yeah, and how I experience it in real life and how others know in real life that I'm a follower of Jesus is because I love other people. Like I love other followers of Christ. The love that we have for each other. That's the
scripture. John 13:35, go look it up. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples.
Nice. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Share this podcast and come hang out with us on Sundays at 10 a.m. at the Bear Levin Studio YMCA at Wellspring. Love you guys. See ya.
Bye-bye.